My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the mascara, and I could hear my roommate's keys scraping against the front door lock just one room away from where I was standing half-dressed in front of the bathroom mirror with my sister's blouse unbuttoned to my waist. And I knew in that exact frozen second that the next 10 seconds would either erase every quiet secret I had been keeping for 2 years, or it would expose me to the one person whose opinion I was not ready to lose. That moment, that single breath between the turning of the key and the sound of the door opening, was the exact instant when my old life quietly stepped aside to let my new life walk forward, and once it did, there was no going back. I never planned for any of this. If you had told me 5 years ago that I would one day sit in front of a camera, speaking in my own voice, telling thousands of strangers that I am a crossdresser and that I have made peace with it, I would have laughed, swallowed the lump in my throat, and changed the subject within seconds. Back then, I was the guy everyone called steady, dependable, the guy who never missed a deadline and never raised his voice, the guy whose friends bragged about because he was always composed, always tidy, always packaged in a navy sweater and a pair of plain sneakers like some boring stock photo of a young professional. And underneath that wrapping, very quietly, very politely, I was slowly suffocating.
I did not know the word for it yet.
I did not know that there was a community of people who felt the same strange double pulse inside them, who understood the soft hush that ran through their chest when they put on a silk scarf or when they smoothed foundation across their cheekbones and watched their reflection bloom into someone they somehow recognized even though they had never actually met. I thought I was the only person on earth who felt this way, and I thought I was broken, and I carried that broken feeling around like a stone in my pocket for years before I finally turned it over and looked at it. Let me tell you how that stone got there in the first place, because I think a lot of you listening right now are carrying a similar stone and you do not even know yet what it is. I grew up in a small town where manners mattered and where boys were not supposed to linger in front of mirrors. My mother was a seamstress and my father was a mechanic, and their home was a place of clear rules, warm food, and very little room for softness in a boy like me. I learned quickly how to fold myself into the shape my family expected. I learned to walk with my shoulders pulled back, to keep my voice low and flat, to never tilt my head when I was curious about something, to never touch a piece of fabric in a store with the careful attention that my fingers wanted to give it. I learned to walk past the women's section of any department store as if it were a room with a glass wall I was not allowed to enter. And yet, every single week, I found excuses to walk past it again. There is a particular way a soft cotton dress catches the overhead lights in a department store, and if you have ever felt it, you already know exactly what I am describing, and if you have not, it is worth standing in that aisle one day just to see how the light folds across the cloth. I would stand 3 feet away and look, and I would tell myself I was only browsing, only killing time, only waiting for my sister who was somewhere in the same store. Then one rainy Saturday afternoon, when I was 19 and my sister had gone to try on a pair of jeans, I made the worst mistake of my life and the best decision of my life in the same 5-second window. I reached out and I touched a hanger. I pulled the dress toward me slowly, just enough to feel the weight of it in my hand, just enough to feel the fabric move, and the moment I did, something inside my chest clicked into place like a key turning inside a lock I had not known existed. I held that dress the way other boys held a basketball, with a kind of quiet reverence I did not have the vocabulary to explain. I lifted it off the rack. I held it against my chest in front of the long mirror at the end of the aisle. And for the first time in my life, my reflection did not feel like a stranger looking back at me. The older woman standing next to me in the aisle glanced over, looked at me for half a second, looked at the dress, and quietly went back to folding a stack of sweaters. I put the dress back. I left the store. But I left the store carrying something heavier than I had walked in with, and that something was a permission slip signed in a language I did not yet understand. The first turning point did not arrive with a bang. It arrived with a small, private hush. For weeks after that day in the store, I thought about it. I lay in bed at night and replayed the moment, the feel of the fabric, the weight, the hush. I told myself it was curiosity, a passing fancy, something every teenage boy probably experienced when he tried something new. I buried it under layers of denial, and the more I buried it, the more it pushed back upward. Eventually, I could not keep it buried, so I made a very small agreement with myself. I told myself that I would try, exactly once, exactly by myself in a locked room for exactly 15 minutes, and that if I hated it, I would stop. I did not hate it. The night I tried it for the first time, I was 20 years old, alone in my bedroom, with 3 layers of deadbolts and a folded towel pressed under the door. I wore a charcoal turtleneck that belonged to my sister, a pair of dark leggings from a thrift store bag I had bought with cash because I did not want a paper trail, and I stood in front of the standing mirror in the corner of my room. I had no makeup. I had no wig. I had no idea what I was doing. And yet, when I looked at my reflection, the person staring back at me was not a performance. It was not a costume. It was not a costume party. It was me, standing in my own bedroom, finally breathing. I took a breath so deep that my ribs hurt, and I realized in that exact moment that I had not taken a deep breath in years. That was the second turning point. It was the moment a private curiosity quietly upgraded itself into a private need, and from that night on, there was no honest way for me to pretend it was a hobby. Practical lesson 1, and I am going to weave these into the story because I want you to leave this video with more than a feeling. Practical lesson 1. Start in private, on purpose. Do not let the first moment of dressing be accidental. Do not let it be at a party. Do not let it be in a costume context. The first time you present to yourself should be slow. Locked door slow. Mirror only slow.
Why?
Because if your first experience is messy, hurried, or surrounded by other people, your body will associate the whole act with stress. You want your nervous system to learn from day one that this is a safe space. So pick a night, lock the door, give yourself an hour, and let your shoulders drop. That was the second turning point. And inside it, there was also a small practical lesson that I want to hand you. Practical lesson 2. Your first outfit should be comfortable in 3 places: your waist, your shoulders, and your feet. If any of those 3 places is fighting you, the rest of the experience will be interrupted, your shoulders will tighten, your stance will narrow, you will read your own reflection as anxious, and you will mistakenly believe the reflection is the truth. The truth is the clothing was wrong, not you. I want to pause the story right here for a moment because I know some of you listening have not yet crossed that threshold, and I think it is important to speak to you directly. If you are sitting in your room right now, in whatever you are wearing, in whatever lighting, in whatever secret, I want you to hear me when I say this. The feeling is not going to disappear because you ignore it. It is not going to disappear because you shame yourself for it. It is not going to disappear because someone you love tells you it is wrong. What will happen if you keep ignoring it is that it will compress. It will sink. It will harden, slowly, into something that does not belong to you anymore, something that begins to manage your life instead of being a part of it. I made that mistake. I waited years. I do not regret my years, because they taught me patience and they taught me the shape of my own fear. But I do wish someone had told me, sooner, that this was not something to be ashamed of. So let me tell you now, because no one told me. You are not broken. You are not weird. You are not alone. There are more of us than you think, and most of us are very, very quiet about it. The third turning point came with a needle and a thread. I learned to sew. Not because I wanted to become a fashion designer, not because I wanted to upload sewing tutorials to a social media account, but because I had this desperate, deeply specific need to build a wardrobe that fit me the way off-the-rack clothing never did, and I could not exactly walk into a women's boutique with my measurements written on a piece of torn notebook paper. So I sat down at my mother's old Singer machine, the one tucked under a sheet in the garage, and I taught myself. I ruined 11 tops before I got one right. I cried after the 5th. I almost gave up after the 7th. But on the 11th, I held up a simple A-line skirt, charcoal gray, lined, modest, the kind of skirt a bank teller might wear on a casual Friday, and the hem was straight, and the seams were clean, and it fit me like a question finally answered. There is something profoundly healing about being the person who makes the clothes you wear. I cannot fully describe it. Imagine going your entire life wearing borrowed clothing, clothing that always pinched somewhere, clothing that always whispered that you were somehow the wrong shape, and then one day you slip into something you built with your own hands, something that fits every part of you, including the parts you have been hiding. It is intoxicating. It is also terrifying because you realize in that moment that you are capable of building a self you can actually live inside. I wore that skirt that night for exactly 45 minutes, alone, in front of the mirror, and then I folded it and put it at the back of a drawer, and I swear to you my hands were trembling the entire time I took it off. Practical lesson 3. If clothing malfunctions when you put it on, the clothing is the problem, not your body. Most mass-produced women's clothing is built for a narrow silhouette that most actual women do not have, let alone most crossdressers. Learn your real measurements. Learn to sew a hem, take in a waist, let out a shoulder. One simple change can transform a piece of clothing from something you tolerate into something that feels like it was made for you. Practical lesson 4. Build slowly. Build in seasons. Do not buy a full wardrobe in one weekend. You will overpay, you will overbuy, you will drown in fabric. Buy one good top, wear it for 2 weeks, learn how it behaves in motion, in cars, in chairs, in daylight. Then buy one piece that pairs with it. Build your wardrobe the way a quiet gardener builds a bed, one plant at a time, watching how each one responds to the soil before adding the next. Practical lesson 5. Photograph yourself in every outfit, and do it in 3 lights, in front of a window, under a ceiling lamp, and outdoors in shade. The difference between those 3 lights will teach you more about how clothing behaves than any influencer review ever will. The 4th turning point happened online, as so many of ours do. I found, after 2 years of private dressing, after hundreds of late-night sessions in front of the mirror, after a drawer full of carefully folded clothing my family had no idea existed, an online community of people like me. It was not the loud corner of the internet. It was a quiet, well-moderated forum. People used first names only. There were rules about respectful language. There were weekly threads about voice training, about wigs, about posture, about how to handle a parent who found a box of clothing under your bed. I read that forum for 3 weeks before I made my first post. When I did, the post was 3 lines long. I wrote, "Hello, I think I am like you. I do not know where to begin." Within 20 minutes, 14 people replied. They did not mock me. They welcomed me. One person sent me a long private message that I still have saved, and in that message they wrote something that I have since quoted to dozens of other newcomers who have asked me the same frightened question. They wrote, "You are not starting from scratch, you are starting from experience. Everything you have learned about style, about texture, about what feels good against your skin, you have already been learning it. The only difference now is that you are giving yourself permission to admit it." That sentence cracked something open in me. It cracked the door I had been holding shut for 2 years. That was the 4th turning point. Practical lesson 6. Find your people, but be patient and be picky. There are loud, ugly spaces online for this community, and there are quiet, dignified ones. Look for the latter. Look for moderators who care, rules that are enforced, and conversations that feel like a dinner table and not a locker room. Once you find that space, do not just lurk. Post. Introduce yourself. Even the smallest act of typing "Hello, I am here, I am like you," is an act of bravery that your future self will thank you for. Practical lesson 7. Be careful with private messages at first. Newcomers are vulnerable, and there are people in every community who will mistake that vulnerability for an invitation. Do not share your home address, your workplace, your real-time location, your strongest identifying details until you have observed a person across many threads and many months. Trust is a slow commodity in this life, and that is okay. Slow is safe. The 5th turning point came the first time I dressed and went outside. I want to be very careful here. I dressed in a way that was safe, modest, and consistent with how I presented myself at home. I wore neutral colors, I kept my shoulders relaxed, I did not wear a wig that day because my hair, although short, was soft enough to style with a little work. I wore light makeup, nothing dramatic, the kind that looks like you are simply well-rested and well-hydrated. I drove to a bookstore across town, parked 2 blocks away, walked in, and bought a novel. The cashier called me ma'am without hesitation. She did not squint. She did not double-take. She handed me my receipt with a polite smile and said, "Have a nice day," and walked on to the next customer. An older couple browsing near the door glanced at me the way they would have glanced at anyone, the way you glance at a stranger you will never see again, and then they went back to their shelf. I walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat. I did not start the engine for 15 minutes. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, tears streaming quietly down my face, with my sunglasses on so no one could see me through the windshield. That 15 minutes in a parked car was the fifth turning point. It was the first time the world responded to me in the language I had been quietly rehearsing for 2 years. Practical Lesson 8. Your posture changes everything. The way you hold your shoulders, the way you tilt your head, the way you walk at half speed through a parking lot, these tiny adjustments add up to something enormous. Practice posture at home. Walk slowly across your room with a book balanced on your head, the way dancers do. Sit with your knees together. Watch how other women around you, not performers, not models, just ordinary women on an ordinary Tuesday, hold themselves when they are not thinking about it. Your body knows how to do this. It has been watching. You just have to give it permission. Practical Lesson 9. Voice is half the impression. Tone, not pitch, is what carries. Lift the resonance slightly toward the front of your face, slow down, end statements with a soft downward tail rather than a hard straight line. Practice by reading children's books aloud to yourself in your room. No one will ever hear you. The muscles of your mouth and throat will learn new shapes, and over time those shapes become natural, not performed. Practical Lesson 10. Pick your first public environment on purpose. The bookstore worked for me because it was quiet, well-lit, low stakes, and full of people already absorbed in their own worlds. Coffee shops in the early morning, art galleries on weekdays, museums on senior discount days. These are forgiving rooms. Bars at midnight are not. Choose forgiveness for your first dozen outings. The sixth turning point was the worst one, and I cannot skip it because videos like this that only show the pretty parts are dishonest, and they do not help anyone. I had a slip. I was at my parents' house for Sunday dinner, and I was wearing a thicker turtleneck than usual because I had not yet figured out how to manage chest shape properly under a regular shirt, and my mother, without thinking, reached out and tugged at the neckline the way mothers do, the way mothers have been doing since the beginning of time, to fix it before company arrived. And her hand brushed against something flat and structured that she had not expected. She froze. She did not say a word. She slowly let go of the turtleneck and finished setting the table. I could hear the silverware clinking against the plates for the rest of that evening, and every clink sounded like a small accusation. She never said anything. We did not have a conversation. I went home that night, and I sat on the floor of my apartment with my back against the door, and I cried until I had nothing left, and I thought, this is the end, this is how it comes out, this is the moment everything I have built falls apart. That was the sixth turning point. It was a small slip, but it became a large reckoning because it taught me that I could not keep building two separate lives indefinitely. Something had to give. Practical Lesson 11. Have an exit plan for every space you enter in person. Dress in layers you can quickly remove. Know your nearest safe space. Keep a small bag in your car with basics so you can revert quickly if you need to. More importantly, decide in advance what you are willing to disclose, to whom, and when. Silence is not a strategy. It is a temporary bandage. Practical Lesson 12. When slips happen, do not catastrophize them in real time. A slip is information, not a verdict. Write down what happened, what you could have done differently, and what you will do next time. Slip itself is small. The story your mind builds around the slip is the real damage. The seventh turning point came when I stopped being silent. I did not come out in some grand dramatic gesture. I did not post a video. I did not write a long letter. I did not gather my family for a confession. I simply told one person, my older sister, who I trusted more than anyone on this earth, and I told her in the most ordinary way possible. I told her in the kitchen, while she was washing dishes, with the radio on in the background, with the dishes clinking and water running, because I did not want to give the moment more weight than it could hold. I said, "There is something I need you to know about me, and I would like you to hear it before anyone else does." She turned off the water.
She dried her hands. She looked at me.
I will not give you the exact words I said because some of those words belong only to her, but I will tell you what she said back. She said, "I have known for a long time. I have been waiting for you to tell me so I could love you loudly about it." Practical Lesson 13. Choose your first person very carefully. Do not come out to the person most likely to validate you. Come out to the person most likely to love you at your quietest. The first person you tell will set the tone for every future conversation. So give that role to someone who has earned it many times over, someone whose response will be rooted in love, not surprise. Practical lesson 14. Pick the place, not just the person. A kitchen with the radio on is a different conversation than a dining room with the lights low. Choose a place with gentle background noise, with horizontal space, with an exit for both of you if the conversation goes heavier than either of you expected. Setting is half of disclosure. The 8th turning point came when I brought my sister into my wardrobe. Not literally into a closet, but into the full picture. I let her see the drawer, the sewing machine, the standing mirror, the small collection of makeup I had built up slowly over years, the wig stand, the boxes. I did not perform for her. I did not dress up for her. I simply opened the door. She looked at everything, including the 11 skirts I had ruined before I got one right, and she said, "Can I borrow the gray one? The one with the clean hem?" We laughed. That was the 8th turning point. Humor is one of the most underrated tools in this life. Practical lesson 15. Let the people who love you into the ordinary parts of this, not just the dramatic parts. The drawer, the mirror, the mug you drink tea out of while you are getting ready. The everyday objects are how the people who love you will eventually accept you, not by the big confession, but by the mugs and the drawers and the scissors on the bathroom counter. Normalize the objects before you normalize the big reveal. Practical lesson 16. Practice saying one short sentence about yourself out loud every day until the sound of it stops hurting. For me, that sentence was simple: I am a crossdresser. I said it to the empty kitchen first, then to the empty bathroom mirror, then to my sister, then to my closest friend, then to a small online group, then to a slightly larger one, then to a paid therapist who specializes in gender identity. The sentence never got easier, exactly, but it got more familiar, and familiarity, over time, is its own kind of courage. The 9th turning point was practical, and it was necessary. I built a real wardrobe. Not a costume drawer, not a single perfect outfit, but a working, rotating, properly organized wardrobe the way any adult builds a wardrobe. I learned what flattered my frame, what colors worked with my skin tone, what necklines photographed well, what fabrics breathed, what shoes were actually comfortable after 3 hours of walking. I learned all of this slowly. I learned from trial and error, from thrift stores, from late-night browsing on secondhand sites, from quiet conversations with other crossdressers who had already walked this road. Practical lesson 17. Take fashion seriously as a skill. Read, watch, save images. Study other people who are your shape, your height, your coloring, and copy their choices until you understand the why. Fashion is not frivolity. It is identity made visible. Practical lesson 18. Thrift stores are your best friend and your best teacher. Thrift stores do not judge. Thrift stores do not run out of size 14 shoes in the men's section when you are secretly looking for size 10 heels. Thrift stores teach you to stretch a budget, to see fabrics in person, to recognize the difference between polyester that breathes and polyester that suffocates. Spend 2 slow afternoons a month in thrift stores and your wardrobe will double in value without doubling in cost. Practical lesson 19. Build a small kit and keep it in a single bag. Foundation that matches your skin. A neutral eyeshadow set. A brow pencil. A clear brow gel. A setting powder. 2 lip colors, 1 nude, 1 bolder. A small pair of tweezers. A small pair of scissors. Travel size micellar water.
Cotton pads.
A few disposable mascara wands. This bag should be ready to grab and go, not assembled from 5 different drawers in a panic. Routine is what reduces stress across time, not talent. The 10th turning point was the first time I walked into a women's restroom in public. I am not going to romanticize it. I am not going to pretend it was always easy. The first time was awful. My hands were shaking. I rehearsed the walk 5 times in the hallway. I walked in, I washed my hands, I left. That was the entire interaction. Nothing dramatic happened. No one stared. The woman at the sink glanced at me for half a second and went back to her own reflection. A second time, a few weeks later, I was in a department store and I used the restroom more deliberately, and a woman next to me complimented my earrings without any context, and the small, kind remark almost made me cry right there at the sink. That was the 10th turning point, and it was small, and that is exactly why it mattered. Practical lesson 20. Privilege is context. You have to read the room, the building, the neighborhood, the time of day. Some spaces are easier than others. Some cities are kinder than others. Some buildings still enforce dress codes that do not include you. Read the signs, watch the locals, and when in doubt, err on the side of safety, not pride, because you can come back another day. Practical lesson 21. Hand washing is a wonderful social equalizer in restrooms. Walk in with intention. Wash your hands. Meet no one's eyes for more than a second. Leave. It is never the dramatic entrances from the movies. It is 1,000 small, quiet, polite interactions, and most of them go completely unnoticed, which is exactly the point. Practical lesson 22. If a space feels hostile, leave. Do not negotiate with yourself about whether you belong there. You do not owe any room your dignity. There will be other spaces that welcome you, and there will be days when the welcoming spaces are not available, and those days are days to stay home in front of the mirror and learn something new instead. The 11th turning point came the first time I was misgendered on purpose. Not by accident, not by a glance, but with intention. A man at a gas station called me sir after I had clearly presented, deliberately, in a way that left no ambiguity. I felt the sting of it for weeks. I replayed the moment. I rebuilt the scene in my head. Eventually, I realized the sting was useful because it told me what I cared about, and caring about it was not vanity. It was clarity. That was the 11th turning point. Practical lesson 23. Distinguish between discomfort and danger. Discomfort is information. Danger is a signal. Discomfort tells you to adjust, to learn, to try again. Danger tells you to leave. Knowing the difference will keep you safe. Practical lesson 24. Decide in advance what your repair ritual is after a hard interaction. For me, it is a long shower, a cup of black tea, and 30 minutes of sewing. For my sister, it is a walk around the block. Find yours, write it down, and use it on the days when the world is not kind. Repair rituals are not luxuries. They are the spine of this life. The 12th turning point is the one I am still living inside. It is the moment this old life quietly stepped aside to let my new life walk forward. I am not at the end of the story because the story does not end. It just changes shape. I am writing this script in my own apartment, in a soft sweater, with a cup of tea going cold on the desk because I keep forgetting to drink it. My wardrobe is organized. My mirror is mine. My sister knows, and a handful of carefully chosen people know, and the rest of the world meets whoever I decide to present on a given day. Some days I present in a way that leans feminine. Some days I present in a way that leans neutral. Some days I just want to wear sweatpants and not think about any of it. Every day is mine. Every day is a small negotiation between the person I was taught to be and the person I actually am, and on most days the negotiation ends peacefully, and on the worst days it ends in tears, and on the best days it ends in laughter, and on every day it ends with me still here, still myself, still standing. That is the 12th turning point, and it is the one I think you, the viewer, are still inside as well. So let me offer you the last practical lessons of the video, and I am going to bundle them together because I think they belong together. Practical lesson 25. You do not have to choose between your old life and your new life. You only have to let them coexist, slowly, on your own timeline, with your own language, on your own terms. The old you is not erased. The new you is not replacing the old you. The old you is becoming the foundation of the new you. Nothing is lost. Everything is being integrated. That is the heart of crossdressing, the deep, quiet, unflashy heart of it. It is not performance. It is integration. It is the slow, patient art of giving every part of yourself a place at the table, not just the parts the world has historically approved of. Practical lesson 26. Do not let anyone rush your timeline. Some days you will want to dress and walk down the street. Some weeks you will want to lock the door and not leave the apartment. Both weeks are fine. Both weeks are you. The world will try to put you on a schedule. Ignore the schedule. Your body knows its own pace. Practical lesson 27. Find one creative outlet that has nothing to do with how you look. For me, that was sewing, but it could be painting, it could be cooking, it could be gardening, it could be writing. Without a creative outlet that is not about your body, this life can become a hall of mirrors. You need at least one room in your life where you are producing something instead of only arranging yourself. Practical Lesson 28. Build a relationship with a therapist who understands gender, not to fix you, but to give you a sounding board. There are therapists who specialize in this, who will not try to conversion therapize you, who will not pathologize what you are living. A great therapist is worth their weight in gold, and they are out there, and you can find one through a reputable directory, through a community recommendation, or through a discreet online search. Practical Lesson 29. Save money for your wardrobe, but save it quietly. Do not put your entire paycheck into a single outfit. Save a little every month. Build slowly. The slow builders are the ones whose wardrobes still look great 5 years from now. The fast spenders are the ones whose wardrobes are full of regret by year 2. Practical Lesson 30. You are allowed to take breaks from this life. You are allowed to not dress for a month. You are allowed to pack everything into a box and put the box in the back of a closet and not look at it for 6 months, and you are allowed to unpack it again the day you are ready.
This is not a job.
This is not a performance review. This is your life. Take breaks from your own life when you need to, and love yourself through the breaks. I want to thank you for staying with me through this whole video. I know this topic is not easy, I know this topic is not safe everywhere, and I know some of you are listening right now with the door locked and your headphones in, which is exactly how I listened to videos like this for years before I made my own. If you have made it this far, then you already know more about me than most people in my offline life, and I want to honor that by giving you one last image before the video ends. Go back to the first sentence, the one I said to you at the very top of this video. My hands were shaking, I was holding mascara, my roommate was at the door. That moment felt like the end of everything. It was not. It was the beginning of everything. The roommate walked in, looked at me, blinked, and quietly closed the door behind her, and then, through the door, in a voice I will never forget, she said, "Take your time, sis." I almost dropped the mascara again. But this time, I did not drop it because I was afraid. I almost dropped it because I was laughing, and because for the first time in my life, someone had handed me a small, ordinary word that the rest of the world had not seen fit to give me, and that word was enough to change everything. That is the story. That is why I made this video. Because somewhere out there right now, there is someone in a locked room with a towel under the door, learning how to breathe for the first time, and I want that person to know that one day, someone is going to call them a word that they have earned, and that day will feel like the first exhale after years of holding their breath. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Leave a kind comment if you felt seen by this one. Share this with someone you trust, and come back next week because I have another story to tell you, and this time, the roommate walks in with a cup of tea in her hand, and we are both wearing the same earrings, and we are laughing. Good night, take care of yourselves, and remember, you are not alone.